What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40K. In this episode, I'm not going to be going over some lore. I'm actually going to be going over the poll that I asked you guys a couple days ago on the channel, where I asked what is the worst piece of 40K lore since the introduction of the Primaris Marines. So ever since 8th edition, we've been getting a lot of lore, a lot of campaign books, and a lot of these new revelations haven't been hitting pretty good when it comes to the 40K fan base. So I asked you guys basically between three options, which was female custodes, the terminus decree, or other, basically telling me in the comments what other piece of lore you guys really hate. And with 68% of the vote, of course, it had to be the female custodes. Now, I know for a fact that this came out of the blue. In the codex for the Emperor's finest, they were not a brotherhood anymore. It turns out that for the longest time, there was always female custodes. Now, this is different than female space marines, because when it comes to female space marines, they have explicitly said that the gene seed requires the male chromosome to work in order for them to become these super soldiers. However, when it comes to the custodes, they don't use gene seed. They do psycho-alchemies and gene enhancements and stuff like that to create a pinnacle warrior, a pinnacle human that has been bolstered pretty much since early childhood to become, honestly, the best human they can be. Now, emphasis on human, because there is nothing in the lore that says that they need to be a male. The only thing in the lore that has said that was that they had to be a brotherhood. Obviously, now it turns out that there was always females within the ranks of the Grey Knights, or the Custodes, and that again, irked a lot of people. Coming in second place with 26% of the vote is the Terminus Decree. So that is probably the newest bit of lore that has made the internet erupt, and it basically said that the Grey Knights have to go and attack the Golden Throne and take on the Emperor if he does ascend into something more. If he leaves his physical body, he has to basically be forced back into his body so that he could keep the Astronomicon lit, keep protecting Terra. And it seems that there is no specific instruction as to how the Grey Knights can do this. So basically it's saying, oh, you guys gotta go fight through all of Terra, fight your way to get to the Imperial Palace, fight your way to get into the throne room, where you have not just the custodes protecting him, but also the Sisters of Silence, which are literally the one thing that can break down the Grey Knights, because the Grey Knights won't be able to use their psychic abilities if they're within the pariah field of these gnolls. So because of this, they're basically having a suicide mission to go and fight the Emperor. And if they do get to the throne room, to the Golden Throne, and they do get to bring the Emperor back in his body, that's not an easy task. I don't think the Grey Knights are capable at all to take on the Emperor if he ascends to like a god, or if he becomes this like demon thing. Because if we go back into the last book of The End and the Death, Volume 3, where you see the Emperor becoming the Dark King, this basically evil, destructive force, he was going toe-to-toe with Horus, who was empowered by all four of the Chaos Gods. And this battle was one of just insurmountable power, crazy warp shenanigans going on. I don't see the Grey Knights being able to douse or at least put down this version of the Emperor. So it literally is a suicide mission for the Grey Knights. Why would they have this, especially with no direct implications as to how to achieve this? But anyway, yeah, that to me made no sense, because I thought the Terminus Decree was already revealed a couple months ago. But anyway, I guess either this was a retcon or this was a new revelation or whatever. But anyway, going into the comments, because there were a couple comments that were pretty interesting. So going with Kevin Scroggins, he says that his would be how the Sisters of Battle used to be the only uncorruptible force in the galaxy, never able to fall to chaos. However, one sister did, and then another, and another. And now with the new lore for Angron, he literally turned hundreds of thousands of them to basically Khorne's favor during the Arcs of Omen campaign. Yeah, I remember this part. I thought this was a pretty cool piece of lore where basically Angron destroys this like machine that was capable of like opening the Astronomicon or some shit like that. And through the destruction of this thing, he created the Murder Tide, and every being in this sector of the galaxy pledged themselves to Khorne, except for the Grey Knights, the Adeptus Custodes, and the Sisters of Silence. So yes, that does include Guardsmen, Space Marine, any other type of human, and Sisters of Battle. So it doesn't show that they're immune to the effects of chaos. They do fall to chaos just as well as any others. And to me it makes sense that the Sisters of Silence won't, because they're blanks. Psychic stuff doesn't really affect them. Again, the Grey Knights, they're warriors of the Emperor, rumored to have the gene seed of the Emperor in him, so they would be more resilient. And of course you've got the Adeptus Custodes, which were like created to be not really messed with when it comes to the warp, but that has, you know, a few cracks in it, like how we saw in the again in the end of the Horus Heresy, where you see them being puppeteered by chaos. So they didn't fall to chaos, but they were manipulated by them. So yeah, when GW establishes certain things and then just goes about and changes it, it could be for the worse. But I think this was a good instance of the ends justify the means, because the means actually made sense. You're having this like huge machine capable of like manipulating the warp, and when Angron destroys it in a fit of rage, also killing Grey Knights in the process, and I think he summoned like 8 bloodthirsters as well. Like this, it's this whole awesome thing. Like I really think you guys should read that Arcs of Omen book with Angron. It's really amazing. And so destroying this huge weapon, or it wasn't even a weapon, it was just like a device, caused this ripple to affect the section of space. And since it was Angron, of course, he was able to create this Murder Tide. And to me, that was one of the best pieces of lore that came out of the Arcs of Omen. So I don't agree with you there, but thanks for bringing it up, because I get to talk about it. This other one, though, it's always been an interesting when the Tyranids are brought up. He goes to say that the Tyranids are both unstoppable and stoppable. Yeah, so there was a campaign where you could play games at your local, you know, Warhammer store, and these games were recorded. So the winner of the Tyranids versus the Space Marines would be tallied up, and then that would affect the campaign and lore. So it seems that if you watched the 9th edition trailer, I believe, the Tyranids were unstoppable. You've got Tyranids taking over world after world, and you see Guilliman is just getting like frustrated because his Marines aren't able to handle the Tyranid threat. But they're always stopped when it comes to like the novelizations. Even though I believe the Tyranids were winning at first, the Space Marines ended up taking the campaign. So the hive mind, the tendrils of the Tyranid fleet are surrounding the galaxy, and it seems that they are this inevitable force that will eventually consume all life, all biomass. But they get stopped here and there. They seem to be written as like this huge terror, and yet they don't really do much, even though they say they do. Yeah, it's hard to write the Tyranids because you want to make them this imposing threat. You can't use diplomacy against them. If something ends up, you know, working against them, they evolve pretty rapidly so that they're not, you know, losing to that again. There was a time where the Tau were using plasma weaponry to great effect, and then within like 24 hours, the next Tyranid lineage was able to have tougher chitinous shells, and now plasma weapons weren't really doing much. So they do evolve, they do devour. You now have the introduction of Norn's emissaries that are capable of taking on an entire squad of custodes and taken out, 3 out of the 5, 4 out of the 5. But yeah, these guys are like, epic level threats, and yet they get stopped time and time again. So I think it's one of those things where like the Tyranids just can't win. And lastly, I'll do this comment by Sean Williamson. I think what people miss as supporters of the new lore is that anytime you retcon lore, it will make a lot of the things that are established irrelevant. If it continues down that path, it loses its meaning to the story or previous stories. Now, I don't care either way on the divisive nature of the world we live in today. It's unavoidable, sadly, that people build too much into things. Having all that been said, I think that what would have been nice is allowing people's imagination to take more of a role in the development of their armies and lists. In the beginning of its creation, there was more than that in 40K, with some solid lore to build from and go from there. But like the creators of new models in which you have limited options, I feel the same has to be done to the lore as well. Continuing on the comments, Textgram says that Warhammer has been around since the 80s, and every bit of lore has changed since then. The first book came out around 1987 and has thousands upon thousands of stories since then. New authors, new writers, and they get to retcon the whole scenario about every 5 to 10 years, roughly. Lore changes, and it's just part of the setting. The biggest thing I've seen change since getting my first book in 1990 is the fan base. So there you have it, guys. I mean, like it or hate it, 40K has been changing ever since its inception. The Necrons were these mindless robots, and now the upper echelons, the Necron courts, the lords, they retained their personality, and you can have books with actual characters, character arcs, instead of just seeing these guys as a mindless threat that you can't really write good character stories about. I believe the Space Marines had females in them when they first came out, but that wasn't really selling very well in the 80s, so it became just a male only through the, again, like I talked about, through the gene seed that only affects the male chromosomes. But then you also see that perhaps when it comes to Slanesh, we will see female Space Marines within their ranks. I know Fabius Bile has been experimenting with males and females to become basically stronger humans that he can create into Space Marines. So the lore will change, and just like he said, these changes could be for the better or for the worse. It all depends on your thoughts, your ideals, and how much lore of 40K you ingest. If you're brand new to the setting and you're reading that there has always been, female custodes, that might not affect somebody who's been playing since the 80s and has known since the inception of the Adeptus Custodes that it was just a brotherhood and not anymore. So again, guys, let me know your comments down below if there's any other thing you wish would have stayed the same as in the old lore or changed. Let me know in the comments. But for now, that's all I got for today. Thanks again for watching, commenting, listening, subscribing, and liking. And as always, it's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate. And I'll catch you then. Peace.